I was never a big fan of school trips. They're too loud and everyone gets really drunk, then really sober, and then it's all really awkward the next day at school. But last spring, Mr. Sanchez, our head teacher, made a very attractive invitation to an end-of-the-year trip to a nature reserve. He said there would be tons of special activities to choose from, including guitar and creative writing workshops. That sounded interesting enough to give it a shot, but I ended up regretting it deeply, as you're about to find out. I was close to finishing high school, and I hadn't been on a school trip since my primary years. My friend Betsy encouraged me to give it a go, as it was the last chance at a paid-for trip before the much busier and much more expensive college years. So when we boarded the bus and left for the nature reserve, I was actually pretty excited. It was a long drive, and all of the students were singing songs with inappropriate lyrics. Betsy and I chatted and played on our phones until we arrived at the hotel. Well, it wasn't really a hotel. It was a complex with lots of mini cabins and a big common garden. The scenery was beautiful, and we were close to a few famous hikes in protected natural areas. But we weren't going anywhere on our first day, as it was already getting close to sunset. So everyone ate and then scuttered off to their rooms or the garden. I told Betsy that I really wanted to check out the creative writing workshop, as that was one of the things that made me want to come on the trip in the first place. The workshops didn't begin until the next day, but they all held a little welcome event that night, so I put on a nice dress and went to the creative writing cabin with Betsy. When we walked in, there were only a handful of people there. A couple of guys were looking at the available snacks, and a middle-aged man with frizzy blonde-gray hair was sitting down on a chair. I figured he was hosting the workshop, as he came right to us when he saw us looking around. "Welcome," he said with a really wide smile. Then he just stood there, waiting for a reaction. I found it pretty odd, but some people are really friendly, so I didn't think much of it. I said a quiet hi, and Betsy and I shook hands with him. I asked him if he was the workshop leader, and he said, "Of course, I'm Steve. Let me give you a tour of everything around here." Once again, I thought this was a little weird since Steve was only leading a writing workshop, so it wasn't his duty to show us the resort. I looked at Betsy, and she just shrugged in a let's just go with it kind of way. Steve took us outside and talked us through all the buildings, the music workshop cabin, the drama club, basketball, movie club, and so on. He then started walking towards the forest, which encircled the holiday complex. Betsy asked him, "Where are we going now?" But Steve was extremely calm, still smiling in his creepy way. "You'll see. I sure hope you'll like it." By now, I knew something was off. I stopped where I was and I said, "Steve, please tell us where we're going." He just looked at me and kept smiling. He finally said, "Oh, here will do." He then pulled a gun from the back of his pants, and Betsy shrieked in horror. While he was pointing the gun at us, he also pulled some bits of rope out of his jacket and tied me to a tree, facing the tree. I was shouting at him to stop doing this and wriggling as hard as I could, so Betsy managed to run away. Steve pointed the gun towards her and thought about shooting, but then just grunted and gave up. I figured that would have made too much noise and it would have blown his cover. So I started struggling to untie myself even harder, thinking he wouldn't shoot for the same reason as he didn't shoot Betsy. I looked back and felt like I was going to be sick. Steve had taken his pants off. I felt like this was my worst nightmare. Steve muttered something lecherous and horrible when Mr. Sanchez appeared with 2 security guards. They pinned him to the ground, stole his gun, and put it to his head. I was safe, but deeply embarrassed about the head teacher seeing me like this. Needless to say, that wasn't Steve, the creative workshop host. The real Steve arrived later in the evening, and there was a huge scandal at the resort for letting a stranger into a high school camp. The guy was arrested, but I couldn't enjoy the rest of the trip. I kept thinking about what happened and how close I was to something truly life-changing. I just hope other students have a more normal experience on their school trips. I was in 6th grade when I signed up for a school trip to the mountains just before Christmas. It was a very exciting prospect for an 11-year-old with almost no friends. I had just moved to Montana that summer, and all the friends I had made previously were now hours away. We would stay in touch online, but I was really young and I wanted friends I could play with in real life, so when the opportunity for a field trip came around, I was thinking this is the time to join a few kids and become part of a group. But I was forgetting something. I was a shy kid, and most of the groups were already formed, so when I got to the mountain resort, I tried inserting myself into others' conversations, but I didn't get any attention. Once we were having breakfast in this big hotel dinner, and I made a joke about the food there, but I didn't see I had food on my face, and the two girls were just like, "Ew, don't talk to me with food on your face," and moved elsewhere. It was pretty discouraging, and I felt sad and lonely watching all these little groups laugh about something I couldn't be a part of. Our chaperone, Mr. Henry, was pretty relaxed. Every time I looked for him, he would be having a glass of something with another teacher or immersed in something in his phone. So, upset as I was about the whole situation, I left the resort and went wandering on the streets. The resort was midway between a little town and a snowy forest, so I decided I would walk towards the town as I figured it would be slightly less dangerous. I was pretty self-conscious, and I knew my mom would be very angry if she knew what I was doing, but I was angry myself, and I didn't want to be at the hotel anymore. I made it to the town, and I walked around and looked through the shop's windows, and at a few people walking around. It was freezing outside, so there weren't that many people out. After a while, everything started looking the same. All the streets were straight, and they had the same kind of shops and bars. I wasn't used to walking alone either, so before long, I got lost. I tried looking around me for familiar places. I walked to the end of every street hoping to see the resort from there, but no success. Finally, someone saw me in the confused state I was in, a man in his 60s maybe, dressed in a huge green coat and old, washed-out jeans. He shouted at me from across the street, "Are you lost, boy?" Of course, at this point, I needed help, so I said, "Yeah, I'm on a school trip, but we're staying at this hotel outside town and I can't remember the way there." Maybe I shouldn't have given out as many details, but I had no idea what this man had on his mind. He just smiled at me and said, "I'll help you. Come with me." He said he would drive me back to the hotel, but we'd have to stop somewhere on the way to his car. It's not like I had a choice, so I just went with it. We turned left, walked for a few blocks, then stopped at a little DIY store. It was his, I figured, as he unlocked the front door with a set of rusty keys. I told him I could wait for him outside, but he insisted I come in. "It's too cold for a young boy like you to be out there all alone," he said. I started feeling afraid, as I realized I was stuck in this situation now. I walked into the store and he went through a door to the back. I could hear some clinking and some thuds. I had no idea what he was doing. I thought of running away, but right then he came out with a bag of something. Just some tools I meant to bring to my garage for a while now. He smiled at me in a reassuring way, and I actually believed him for a second. He took my hand and led me back to his car, which was another couple of minutes away. It was a dark green truck with a lot of storage space. I hopped in the back as I was sure I didn't want him holding my hand again. He started driving, and I was looking carefully outside the window in order to spot the hotel and get this over with. He left the town and took a right down the main road. I was pretty sure that wasn't the way to the hotel. I asked him, "Are you sure this is the way to the hotel?" Then he looked at me, and I met his eyes through the rearview mirror. My heart stopped when I saw his evil face laughing at me. He wasn't hiding his intent from me anymore. In fact, he was relishing in the moment, seeing my afraid of him. I was desperate. If I got to his place, no one would be able to help me. I had no phone on me, and we were going in the opposite direction away from the hotel. I took a leap of faith, unlocked the door, and jumped out of the car onto the side of the road. He clearly did not expect that, as he didn't stop the car for a while. I curled into a ball when I jumped, and I managed to land without breaking anything. I was covered in winter clothes, and so that might have helped. I got up slowly and started running towards the hotel. I did not look back, and I didn't even breathe, as when I got to the hotel, I threw up. I must have been running at 100 miles per hour. The first ones to see me were the girls that laughed at me that morning. I didn't care one bit about their comments anymore. They looked pretty worried, and they went to tell Mr. Henry about me. I told him what had happened, and he called the police and gave a description of the man in the car. For the rest of the trip, I stayed inside the resort and watched TV. I was too traumatized to even go out skiing with the rest of the kids. However, some of my classmates heard the story and came to talk to me. The silver lining? I ended up making friends at school. Nevertheless, it was a horrifying experience, and I hope that the police found the guy and gave him the right punishment. Last year, our music teacher, Tim, took us on a school trip to town to see an old concert hall and the structure of such a building. Tim was a cool teacher, hence his desire for us to all call him by his first name. He always had something fun planned for us and preferred to do interactive lessons rather than talk to us about something from a book. I was in junior high and definitely liked Tim's teaching style, so I was among the first ones to tag along for the school trip. However, it was about to get pretty nasty. The concert hall almost looked like an abandoned building. It hadn't hosted any shows for a few years, and no one had been tending to its facade either. There were about 15 of us on the trip, and Tim was busy being our entertainer, showing us all the quirky bits around the place, the hallway decorations, the stage design, the vintage chairs. My classmate George suggested we get off of the main hall and explore the rest of the building. George was a fun guy, and we would often chat through fun drawings during boring lessons. He was the kind of friend I would ditch class with. So we went downstairs behind the stage and found a huge network of corridors. There were many backstage rooms, some locked, some filled with old, dusty props that George and I started trying on and picturing ourselves in. For a few good minutes, I felt like ditching Tim's tour was a very good decision. Then it started getting creepy. One of the backstage rooms had a broken mirror in it and some old food on the floor. Old, but not that old. Someone had been in there a few days back. We thought it was odd, and maybe some teens had broken into the building and had some stupid fun inside. George took a photo of the broken mirror and commented that he would document this creepy backstage tour to the end. We got out into the hallway again and found another room with a locked door. There was another door at the end of the hallway with a maintenance sign on it. Probably brooms and buckets, I said, as half of me wanted to go back to the class. But George was adamant we should document the whole experience. So he walked confidently to the maintenance room, and I followed. Just before opening the door, we froze. We could hear some really weird sounds coming from inside. Some sort of scratching and a low moan. I wasn't sure whether that sound was human or there were rats inside. I looked at George to see what he wanted to do, but he already had his phone out and was filming himself opening the door. The door opened with a long squeak, and I looked inside, and I felt a knot in my stomach. There were people on the floor, in a very bad state. Some had scratched their faces till they left bloody marks. Some had teeth missing and holes in their arms. The stench was unbearable. It was a drug hotel. Most people didn't even notice us looking. One woman looked up, and when she saw George filming, she completely lost it. She began to scream with a horrible, hoarse voice and insult us in all the possible ways. This angered another man, who picked up an empty glass bottle and threw it right at us. It hit George's phone and his hand, cutting him and breaking his camera. We closed the door as fast as we could and then ran upstairs to Tim. George ran to the bathroom to clean his cut, and I whispered to Tim and told him what we found, to avoid causing mass hysteria. Tim was concerned enough to round everyone up and head back to the school. He still joked that this was a truly entertaining concert tour, but I didn't feel the least bit amused. Seeing people in that state made me feel sick, sad, and worried. I couldn't get it out of my head for months after, and I kept dreaming about opening doors and finding horrible things on the other side. As I'm slowly forgetting about it, I'd urge all of you to stay safe out there. Whew! Okay guys, that wasn't even half of it. There's plenty more disturbing stories where these came from, so make sure you check out the other videos, if you can handle it. Before you go, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. And remember, stay safe out there.